1973 seems a long time ago. It was the year that I first started writing about the benzodiazepines and warning that they were dangerous drugs. 1973. In 1973 I edited a journal called the British Clinical Journal, and we published a leading symposium dealing with the addictive problems of benzodiazepine tranquilizers. In the 1970s and 1980s, I wrote hundreds of articles about benzodiazepine tranquilizers and sleeping tablets. I made countless television programs. I wrote 3 books about addiction. I made a series of radio programs which were broadcast nationally on the BBC local radio network. I set up a help group for tranquilizer addicts. I produced a newsletter containing information and advice about benzodiazepines. Throughout those 2 decades, the 1970s and the 1980s, I was violently opposed by members of the British Medical Association and the Royal College of General Practitioners, who insisted, contrary to all the evidence, that drugs such as Ativan and Valium were perfectly safe and not in the slightest bit addictive. And all the time I was receiving letters from patients telling me that these drugs had ruined their lives. The phrase I heard time and time again was, "I've been to hell and back." For years my mail from readers was delivered in grey Royal Mail sacks. Patients were numb when they were on the drugs, and they were in torment when they tried to stop them. The size of the problem has been consistently underestimated. When my now out-of-print book, Life Without Tranquilizers, smashed into the bookseller and Sunday Times bestseller lists in 1985, many were astonished because for the first time it became clear that the issue was one which concerned many people. And then, in 1988, there was a breakthrough. The medical establishment still insisted that benzodiazepines were perfectly safe, but the government in Britain took action and told GPs that benzodiazepines should not be prescribed for patients for longer than 2 to 4 weeks because of the risk of addiction. I'm proud of the fact that in 1988, the British Parliamentary Secretary for Health told the House of Commons that the government had acted in response to the articles I'd written. With surprising naivety, I thought we'd won. But sadly, doctors took no notice. GPs were as addicted to prescribing the drugs as patients were to taking them. One generation of doctors retired, only for another to appear and to adopt the same egregious prescribing habits. Benzodiazepines have been prescribed for every ailment known to man or woman. Today, doctors are still handing out prescriptions for these deadly drugs as if they were sweets. It's a huge medical horror story, a massive and disgraceful medical scandal. It's no exaggeration to say that these drugs have caused endless misery and undying pain. They have ruined millions of lives. This isn't rhetoric or exaggeration, it's fact. Benzodiazepines have ruined millions of lives, and those who create the pain still refuse to accept responsibility, and they're still creating pain. And no one in the government, the National Health Service, the British Medical Association, or the Royal College of General Practitioners seems to me to give a damn. Oh, there's modest concern. Committees have been set up, inquiries have been initiated, research is being done. But they've grossly misunderstood the nature of the problem, and they've underestimated the size of it. Worse still, they seem to regard benzodiazepine dependence as being in the same category as heroin addiction or cocaine addiction. Those who are hooked on tranquilizers are blamed for their dependence as if they were in some way responsible for the circumstances. Let's be clear about it. Anyone who has, since 1988, been prescribed benzodiazepine drugs for more than 2 to 4 weeks, been betrayed by their doctor. Any doctor who's prescribed these drugs for longer than a month or has made them available on repeat prescription should be struck off the medical register and banned from practicing medicine. It's possible to claim that doctors who misprescribed the drugs prior to 1988 were simply ignorant. Many could claim with some justification that their patients asked for the drugs. The British Medical Association and the Royal College of General Practitioners were roundly condemning me for drawing attention to the addictive nature of the drugs. And so it was relatively easy for doctors to say, oh, that fellow Coleman's talking nonsense. The British Medical Association says that benzodiazepines are perfectly safe. But things changed in 1988. Since the government warned doctors not to prescribe these drugs for more than 2 to 4 weeks, the rules have been different, and doctors are now completely responsible for the biggest addiction problem Britain's ever seen. It's a far bigger problem than barbiturate addiction or any other prescription drug addiction. One minister after another has promised help. Every promise has turned to dust. The time for committees and discussion groups is long past. It's obscene that the British Medical Association should now offer a view on what needs to be done. There's no more need for research. There's no more need for talking. The patients who are dependent on benzodiazepines need help now. And doctors who are still prescribing these damn drugs without any understanding of the consequences need to be punished. The British Medical Association and the Royal College of General Practitioners can't be allowed to get away with blaming patients for taking these drugs for long periods of time. Doctors, and only doctors, are to blame for this appalling state of affairs. But the medical establishment doesn't like to do or say anything to help because the medical establishment was bought long ago by the big drug companies. Doctors still prescribing these drugs for more than 2 to 4 weeks should, in my opinion, be reported to the General Medical Council. It's about time that those responsible for this ongoing scandal should be required to take responsibility and face the awful consequences of their careless actions. This video has not been monetized, and there's more information about benzodiazepines and many other topics on my website, where there are also no ads and no sponsorship. Thank you for watching An Old Man in a Chair.